The crowd fell silent in shock at what he said next. The smooth crooner had vanished, to be replaced by a broken man who was numbing his excruciating suffering with booze. It was the most tragic moment on television. On June 7, 1917, Dino Paul Crocchetti was born in Steubenville, Ohio, in a two-room apartment above a shoemaker's business. Gaetano and Angela, his parents, were immigrants from Italy who were struggling to make ends meet. For about $18 a week, Gaetano worked 12-hour days as a barber, and Angela cleaned floors and took in laundry to prevent it from being thrown out. Inside, there was no running water. 3 more families shared the backyard restroom with them. Bread, pasta, and whatever veggies they could raise were their only sources of nourishment. Before he was 5 years old, Dino didn't speak a word of English. His accent was ridiculed by the students at Grant Elementary. Just to translate, his older brother had to accompany him to class. Dino still didn't feel like he belonged. He was unable to attend school by the age of 13. He informed his mother that he needed to bring home actual money after dropping out of 10th school. For just 50 cents a day, he began transporting illegal whiskey across the Ohio River at night. By the age of 14, he was collecting bets from steel factory workers who gambled their whole paychecks while running numbers for nearby bookmakers. Before dawn, he delivered newspapers, pumped gas, stocked shelves, and shined shoes at the country club. He lied about his age at the age of 15 in order to get $125 per hour working night shifts at the steel factory. Survival was the goal of every work. It was a challenging task. The salary was minimal. The fatigue was profound. Because he had already experienced life the hard way, he later claimed that easy does became his way of life. And he began to fight. He entered clandestine boxing clubs throughout the Ohio Valley at the age of 15, going by the moniker Kid Crochet. He participated in 36 fights between 1932 and 1936, winning 25 and losing 11. His nose was permanently crooked after being broken by a single blow. He battled bare-knuckled because he could not afford hand coverings. He broke his knuckles, and they never healed properly. His lip was split open by a hook in one battle. The scar remained permanent. People would subsequently describe his half-smile as attractive because he even lost feeling in some areas of his mouth. "I won all but 11, but every fight left something broken," he quipped about his record. In 1936, after a vicious encounter at Steubenville Memorial Auditorium, 19-year-old Dino was struck by a rabbit punch to the temple and fell face first. His breathing ceased. It took 5 minutes for him to return. He was throwing up blood when he woke up and was unable to recall his own name. His concussion was so severe that the doctor told him he might die from another knock to the head, and he spent 3 days in the hospital. His family was unable to cover the $470 hospital charge. For him, that was it. Don't box anymore. He concentrated on singing from that day on. By 1934, when he was only 17, he was dealing blackjack in the backrooms of seedy Steubenville clubs while singing. The crowds favored him. He received tips and imitated Harry Mills from the Mills Brothers. Then a genuine gig arrived. He was employed by bandleader Ernie McKay in 1935 for $75 per week, a substantial amount during the Great Depression. He performed wherever they let him to, including the Walker House and the Rex Cigar Shop. He maintained a calm and easygoing style. It succeeded because it was the complete reverse of all he had experienced. In addition, nobody actually discussed his employment. He was employed as a crooner at the Rex Cigar Store, which was actually a front for an illegal casino, when he was 17 years old. The Scola crime family was in charge of it. Starting at 8 p.m., he worked the roulette wheel. Up until 4 a.m. Making 3 times as much as he did at the mill, $30 a week plus tips. He would sing to soothe gamblers who lost. He maintained his composure in the face of irate mob men. The location was raided twice by federal officials. Both times he got away by way of the back alley. He would perform as Dino Martini with dance bands on slow nights. He was eternally changed by the combination of danger and charm. When she and fellow singer Sonny King were destitute and living in a filthy New York apartment in 1938, they had a crazy idea. They charged 50 cents each person to see bare-knuckle boxing contests in their living room. Until one of them fell, crowds gathered to see them battle. They made $12 the first time Dino completely knocked Sonny out. They continued doing it 3 or 4 times a week until the landlord evicted them and the walls were covered in bloodstains. They were starving. They were in a grave situation. They were doing whatever they could to survive. A significant shift occurred in 1940. Sammy Watkins, the leader of the Cleveland band, offered him $200 a week to tour. There was a catch, though. They altered the name Dino Crocetti after Watkins claimed it was too ethnic. He was Dean Martin after that day. American was the name. It made doors open. Dean traveled the Midwest's ballroom circuit from 1940 until 1943. People recalled the name because of his casual approach and beautiful voice. He wed Betty McDonald in Cleveland in 1941. They had 4 kids. Diana in 1948, Craig in 1942, Claudia in 1944, and Gail in 1945. But Dean never stopped touring while Betty stayed at home. He missed holidays, birthdays, and first steps. The distance was too much for the couple to withstand. In 1949, right before Dean's life fell apart, they got divorced. He nearly had his history come back to haunt him in 1942. He was detained along with a number of dealers and entertainers after police raided a gambling establishment in Cleveland. There were significant charges against him. However, the case was quietly dismissed a few days later. Some claim that his previous bootlegging ties were helpful. The arrest was not concealed by Dean. He bent over it. He created a mystery with it. The crooner with a dubious history. The charming person who grinned after seeing the evil side. In any case, he was drafted into the army in 1943 but was medically released after just 14 months due to a hernia. Everything was altered by that turn of events. Dean stayed behind and rose to fame while other men left for the war. He began charging $500 per night to perform in the Rio Bamba Room in New York. In 1944, he was given his own radio program, Songs by Dean Martin on WAYO. He also signed a recording contract with Diamond Records in 1946. Although the singles were not successful, his voice was heard by hundreds of people, which paved the way for the event that would forever alter comedy. Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin shared the stage at the Atlantic City 500 Club on July 25, 1946. A gap in the schedule had been caused by a canceled act. Dean's weekly income was $150. Jerry is roughly the same. They made the decision to improvise. Dean sung. Jerry pulled faces. The audience went crazy. They were making $1,000 a week in a matter of days. At the Copacabana, it was $5,000 by September. NBC in Hollywood called, and Paramount made them an offer of $50,000 for each movie. My Friend Irma grossed $3 million when it came out in theaters in 1949. They stole the entire film, even though they weren't the main characters. Martin and Lewis produced 16 films between 1949 and 1956, bringing in over $50 million for Paramount. Each release was a success. Their live performances were completely sold out. 4,000 admirers waited outside the Paramount Theater in New York to enter. People laughed at Dean. That's Amore in the Caddy, which he performed, spent 10 weeks at number 2 on the Billboard charts in 1953. 2 million copies were sold. At age 36, he achieved his first gold record. His hallmark tune was that one. However, something broke. Jerry grew larger, louder, and more domineering. It made Dean feel like a sidekick. They were making more than $1 million a year by 1952. The stress increased despite the fact that their variety program, the Colgate Comedy Hour, earned $40,000 per episode. In 1954, Jerry accused Dean of stealing attention at a performance in Las Vegas. Dean turned to leave. Jerry struck him in the mouth after grabbing his shoulder. Dean needs sutures. The following night, they continued to perform. It ended in 1956. They announced their separation to the world on July 24. Hollywood or Bust, their most recent movie, brought in $3 million. Then they vanished. In a single, silent press statement, the comedic duo that had dominated the industry for 10 years disappeared. Most people believe Dean Martin was done when he left Jerry Lewis in 1956. He had been the calm straight man to Jerry's mayhem for 10 years. Their breakup was public, ugly, and noisy. And everyone thought Dean would fade and Jerry would ascend. Dean, however, did not wane. Memories Are Made of This is a song he secretly recorded at Capitol Records just months before the split. It had Easy Rider's background vocals and was encased in a silky charm that Dean alone could provide. In January 1955, the record peaked at number 1 and remained there for 5 weeks in a row. It sold more than 3 million copies by the end of the year. That one song alone brought in $100,000 in royalties for Dean, which he used to purchase his independence and demonstrate that he didn't need comedy to be successful. He continued to construct. Sway demonstrated that he could include a Latin rhythm with his languid drawl and still place in the top 10 in 1954. Inamorata followed in 1955, peaking at number 8. He wasn't crunching like Crosby or belting like Sinatra. Something gentler was what he was doing. His album Dream with Dean, released in 1957, completed the transaction. More than 500,000 copies were sold. The tempo was leisurely, the arrangements were gentle, and the delivery was fluid. He was drinking songs as well as singing them. That easygoing tone became his trademark. He was not squabbling over notes. He was making it appear effortless. People leaned in to listen to everything that was said in lounges, Vegas, and dinner clubs from New York to Chicago. Frank Sinatra then extended an invitation to him in 1962, giving him a seat at the table. Dean was invited to join Sinatra's newly established Reprise Records. With its whimsical renditions of songs like Sebin, Dean's debut album There Was in the French Manor. Dean had complete control over what he recorded, how it sounded, and who set it up thanks to Reprise. He had 20 top 40 songs and more than 40 albums by 1965. He had a 5-year, $1 million contract with Reprise. The freedom was greater than the money. He wasn't a backup for Sinatra. He was independent. Dean earned $10,000 per week as the star of the Copacabana in New York in 1957. It went beyond Sinatra. Almost no one had that much. Nevertheless, he had to sing That's Amore every night. Everyone was familiar with his tune. When he incorporated it, it earned him up to $50,000 per concert. However, he detested it. The phony Italian lyrics irritated him. The cartoon image it provided him was something he detested. He referred to it as a joke. Nevertheless, that song paid for everything, so he sung it more than 1,000 times. For the golf, the homes, and the life in which he was able to select the music he truly enjoyed. Dean achieved the unimaginable in August 1964, when Beatlemania was at its height. Everyone has a romantic partner. Removed A Difficult Day's Night from the top spot. Even though he only had it for a week, that week was crucial. For 5 weeks in a row, the Beatles had dominated the charts. Nobody anticipated it. With the Ken Lane Group, Dean recorded the song, which went on to sell over 1 million copies. He received his first gold record as a result. Dean simply grinned and replied that they had just taken a coffee break when asked how it felt to beat the Beatles. The coldness, however, was unable to conceal all. The IRS knocked on the door in 1958. About $250,000 was stashed away by Dean in Swiss accounts and foreign royalties. In addition to back taxes and penalties, he was slammed with a $100,000 punishment. Despite the negative news, Dean remained calm. In 1959, he introduced the Dino brand of cigarettes. His silhouette was on the packaging. They were promoted as high-end smokes, capitalizing on the very reputation that led to his troubles. He turned the controversy into a brand. Dean alone was capable of doing that. The acting followed. He played the role of Dude, a broken-down inebriated police officer attempting to climb out of a bottle, in Howard Hawks' 1959 film Rio Bravo. For the first time, Dean didn't play a joke or a vocalist. He used scaled-down sets in former Tucson studios to film it. He bled, shivered, and perspired until he was ultimately taken seriously by reviewers. It was dubbed the moment Dean Martin ceased being cool and became human by the British Film Institute. In 2014, the National Film Registry protected the film because it was so good. Ocean's 11 followed in 1960. It was filmed in Las Vegas at night. Dean and the Rat Pack did 2 gigs during the day. They then started filming around midnight. Nobody slept. Whole situations were improvised. For a drunken joke, Shirley Lan even appropriated one of Dean's nightclub lines. It was all like a celebration captured on film. They were creating history at the Sands Hotel. The Top was the name of it. They crammed 34,000 people into the Copa room for 3 weeks in January 1960. Joey Bishop understood the reality, but Dean made it seem simple. While the others drank, Dean left early to go home. He didn't want to wake up for parties, but for golf. In Who Was That Lady, he continued the performance. In a comedy about CIA mix-ups, he played a TV writer. Dean was nominated for a Golden Globe for the movie starring Janet Leigh and Tony Curtis. He portrayed Dino, a lounge singer attempting to bet a housewife in Kiss Me Stupid. The movie was categorically denounced by the Catholic Legion of Decency. To dodge the criticism, United Artists distributed it on a side label. Dean didn't care, though. He never expressed regret. He simply continued to work. He portrayed Sinatra's best buddy in the tumultuous marriage plot of Marriage on the Rocks, 1965. It was the final movie they made together in 20 years. Dean's personal life was also changing at the time. After 9 years and 4 children, his first marriage to Betty McDonald ended in 1949. Only a few weeks after the divorce was finalized, he married Jean Beager that same year. Richie, Gina, and Dean Paul Jr. were their other 3 children. The 24-year marriage wasn't without its problems. Even after Dean's public affairs, Jean remained loyal. She never got married again after their 1973 divorce. Dean was among the wealthiest performers in existence by the middle of the 1960s. They were already making $1 million annually in 1951 with Jerry Lewis, which is more than $123 million now. But money wasn't all Dean sought. He desired authority. He started the Dean Martin Show on NBC in 1965. It lasted for 9 seasons. It was among the top 10 television programs by 1967. He received $34 million from NBC for a 3-year extension. He was permitted to skip rehearsals by his contract. He simply arrived, grinned, and made it work. Whiskey was substituted with apple juice. The charm was enhanced by his garbled speech. People thought he was usually intoxicated, but that was untrue. He was playing a part. According to Richie Martin, he used booze as a prop. Dean started the celebrity roasts and retold the show into the Dean Martin Comedy Hour in 1973. Bob Hope was the first. Jimmy Stewart, Sinatra, and countless more followed. At the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, they recorded. However, a fire destroyed the hotel on November 21, 1980, killing 85 people. For years, production ceased. When Dean returned to complete his obligation, the spark had vanished. Dean and Jerry Lewis eventually got back together in the same decade. The Muscle Dystroph Marathon took place on Labor Day in 1976. It happened because of Frank Sinatra. There were more than 85 million viewers. 20 years have passed since their last conversation. Jerry sobbed. Dean grinned. Backstage, they conversed in low tones. Jerry expressed regret. Dean pardoned him. After that, some claim they spoke every day. Some claim they didn't. Nobody is certain. However, they were a team once more for a single night. Dean Martin entered the public eye in February 1966 as Matt Helm, a retired spy. The world abruptly forgot that he had ever been a member of a comedic pair. It was not intended for the silencers to be this large. Originally intended to be a light-hearted parody of James Bond, the film generated $16.3 million when it debuted in theaters and elevated Dean to the position of star in his own espionage series. He was surrounded by women like Stella Stevens and Sid Charisse, making jokes and rescuing the world, and people enjoyed how laid back he was. The fact that Columbia Pictures didn't wait was also seamless. Only 10 months later, they released the sequel. When Murderers Row was released in December 1966, it was the 11th highest-grossing movie of the year. Dean continued. Following that came The Ambushers in 1967 and The Wrecking Crew in 1968, in which Sharon Tate wowed the audience with what many deemed to be her finest performance to date. She had personal training from Bruce Lee. The strength, the timing, the maneuvers. She learned everything from him. However, the Manson family killed Sharon in her home 6 months after the movie's August 9, 1969, release date. Dean was broken. He lost more than just a co-star. He lost someone with whom he had practiced, laughed, and whose life had just begun. Filming the sixth Matt Helm film was something he declined to do. The Ravagers were already planned and announced. Dean turned to leave. He was disciplined by Colia Pictures by having his Murderers Row profit share frozen, but he refused to back down. That was Matt Helm's end. He returned to something larger 2 years later. When Airport debuted in 1970, it immediately became well-known worldwide. Produced on a budget of $10 million. With $128 million, it became Universal's biggest hit, surpassing even Spartacus. The movie received 9 nominations, including Best Picture, and Helen Hayes won an Oscar. Dean had not finished yet. He played an irresponsible outlaw who kidnaps a woman in order to exchange her for a Gatling pistol in the 1971 film Something Big. It was recorded in Durango, Mexico, and was noisy and rowdy. It was also the final big motion picture in which Dean would play the lead. He had had enough of making headlines. The work, the hours, the pressure. All of it was exchanged for TV specials and quick, low-key cameos that paid nicely. Dean got a new life on television during the 1970s. In 1973, The Dean Martin Show changed to a weekly roast, which was looser and funnier. It began with Bob Hope and continued for 10 years. Week after week, 54 celebrities, mostly from the MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas, were roasted. It was simple. It was not heavy. Dean set the pace. Amidst the second surge of celebrity, an unforeseen event occurred. Dean married Catherine Horn on April 25, 1973, immediately following his divorce from Johnny Beager. Her age was 23. He was 57. They met at a hair salon in Beverly Hills through a friend. Dean's Bear House served as the venue for the wedding before it was transferred to the Beverly Hills Hotel. Sasha, her daughter, was adopted by him. It only lasted 3 years despite efforts to make it work. November 10, 1976, was the date of their discreet divorce. He never had an easy personal life. He had 3 marriages and 8 children, and he had a close relationship with his son, Dean Paul Martin. On November 17, 1951, Dino Jr., as he was known to the world, was born. Additionally, he made headlines in 1979 when he starred in the film Players alongside Ally McGraw. He even received a Golden Globe nomination. But he had other passions besides performing. He enlisted in the Air Force on November 5, 1980. He gained entry into the California Air National Guard after completing fighter pilot training. He was regarded as one of the best, calm, sharp, and in control by those who flew with him. Dean was pleased of his kid because he was good, honest, and decent, not because he was famous. On March 21, 1987, however, everything fell apart. On a regular trip, Dino departed March Air Force Base in an F-4C Phantom jet. A snowfall quickly approached. There was no longer any visibility. The plane was seen on radar at 19,300 feet. It fell 4,000 feet in a matter of seconds and crashed on Mount San Gorgonio at 400 miles per hour. On impact, Dino and Ramon Ortiz, his weapons officer, perished. 6 days passed before the wreckage was located. Dean never got better. Apple juice in a tumbler had always been his performance persona, that drunken swagger. But it was no longer an act following Dino's passing. He actually began drinking. He called off performances. He vanished. His heart shattered and never got better. Dean was asked to go on tour with Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. in March 1988, a year later. It was dubbed Together Again. Although Dean was only there for a week, it began in Oakland to Fortune 5,500 fans. He was unable to do it. The laughter, the crowds, the journey. It was a hollow feeling. He departed from the tour. They claimed he was ill in public. In private, it was sorrow. Liza Minnelli, who took his position, changed the show's name to The Ultimate Event. However, Dean had left. The drinking worsened. His condition deteriorated. After smoking for 60 years, he developed emphysema. He hardly left the house by the early 1990s. He was diagnosed with lung cancer in 1993. Tumors were growing. They recommended that he have liver and kidney surgery. It might buy him years or perhaps more time. Dean, however, declined. He had no desire for surgery. Chemo was not what he wanted. Death was already something he had accepted. Friends pleaded. Sinatra pleaded. Dean, however, continued to repeat the same thing. All I'm doing is waiting to die. That year, he gave up smoking, but it was too late. His body had surrendered already. He remained silent and at home. He smiled courteously to visitors. He didn't fight, though. Dean Martin passed away from severe respiratory failure in his Beverly Hills residence on December 25, 1995, around 3:30 in the morning. He was 78. In his honor, the lights on the Las Vegas Strip went out. He was a brother, according to Sinatra. Once closer than anybody else in the world, Jerry Lewis was on tour when he received the news and sobbed. The funeral for Dean took place in private at Good Shepherd Catholic Church. About 200 people showed up. Dean passed away after this. You mentioned that you attended and spoke at his Dean's funeral. Following his death, you declared, "I lost my partner and best friend, the man who made me the man I am today." Jerry Lewis, Tony Bennett, and Gregory Peck took a stand and told the public what the media had never done correctly. Dean was more than awesome. He was nice. He was powerful. And he never had to demonstrate it. Following his passing, rumors circulated about his true intelligence. Everyone had assumed that Dean Martin simply drank and joked while waiting in line. Then, however, they learned about the real estate empire in Las Vegas. In the 1990s, the land he purchased for $150,000 in the 1960s brought in almost $12 million. $30 million was the estimated worth of his estate. His $120,000 Beverly Hills mansion was eventually valued at around $28 million. When Dina, his daughter, saw how meticulously he had constructed everything, she broke down in tears. With little fanfare, Dean had played the long game. And it was true about the apple juice stuff. At last, Jerry Lewis attested to it. People believed he was sloshed after all those years on TV. On most evenings, though, it was only juice. He feigned intoxication to make people laugh and relax. The real Dean, however, was usually 1 or 2 steps ahead.